I'm back. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Jawad, you can start from here. Ask Akbar Muhammad Khan for Qiraat, then you can take it from there.
Assalamu alaikum. Am I ready to go?
Yeah.
I first of all, let me begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna alhamdulillah, as-salatu as-salamu rasulullah, wal Mahdiya ma'ud, khalifatullah, qad jaa wa mada. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for taking time out of your long weekend, specifically here in North America, and joining our second web conference, MICC's second web conference. Inshallah, we will begin the session today about effective networking. But before we start our discussion and you get to hear from the excellent panelists on this session, I would first like to invite Muhammad Akbar Khan for Qiraat to begin the session. Akbar, please enlighten us and give us the barakah by reading the Quran.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجن من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله العظيم.
Subhanallah. Jazakallah khair, Akbar, for reading one of the most beautiful surahs of the Quran, actually. In fact, our belief is that every ayah and every word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just as beautiful. But when we hear Surah Rahman, and Allah is constantly reminding us, a repetitive verse in the surah about فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ, there is of all the blessings that Allah has given, of all the beautiful things that Allah has given, which ones are we going to deny? And the idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very categorically requiring the believers to ponder upon is that how can we ever be ungrateful and ever not be thinking about and remembering Allah both consciously and subconsciously. So there was a very, very beautiful reminder and very well recited. Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair. So without further ado, I would like to begin this session. And the session, as you all know, or must have learned so far, that it is about effective networking and how do we Mahdavis today are networking, what opportunities there are for us to further enhance our networks if they already are networks, and if there are any gaps, how can we identify and fill those gaps to become a cohesive, coherent community that is, inshallah, all working towards that vision, working towards that noble and spiritual vision of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we actually have the blessing of Allah's didar, Allah's presence in our dunya now, and inshallah, obviously, in the hereafter. So this is a very important discussion, and I hope that you will, all of you who are attending and listening, will take the benefit from this and inshallah come out with some very pointed direction that our panelists are going to share with you and may give you, inshallah, that you can identify what can be done and how you can be connected and how we can bring the community forward together, inshallah. With that, I would request the host to please give me control so that I can start sharing my presentation and start the discussion.
Okay, I make you the co-host.
Jazakallah khair. Is everybody able to see my screen? Just the people on the Zoom, if you can nod, give me a nod, that would be great. Or thumbs up. Jazakallah khair. So again, the discussion is to understand, this is a panel discussion. This is to understand, the effective networks of Mahdavis, what they are. We, inshallah, will look at it from a Mahdavi perspective based on our primary principle of Ishqa Ilahi, inshallah. Before we begin, actually, let me take just about 30 seconds or 1 minute to introduce all our panelists. We have Sister Aisha Mahdi as our, I'm so happy and glad that she agreed to participate. We need participation from the women, and so happy that she is here today. Aisha Mahdi is from Los Angeles. She's a teacher by profession and is an executive committee member of the Mahdavia Islamic Center of California. She's daughter of, as many of you will know, Sayyid Khurmir and Zainab Sajida. Our second panelist is actually all the way from UAE, and we are so grateful for him to get up an unordinary time and participate in this panel discussion. He is no other, you all know him from before. He has participated in previous conferences, even the one that was in Chicago. And actually, he traveled all the way to participate in the first one. Brother Nurul Huda Mujtahidi, originally from Hyderabad. He's residing in Dubai since 1990. Founder and member of Farah Committee. He's also an advisory board member there now. Most of his passion is, inshallah, in community work, and that's how he has been participant and active volunteer for Tanzim Mahdavia. He is an electronics engineer by profession, presently managing organization that's provide computing solutions throughout the Middle East for police, military, and other uses. Last but not the least, Mr. Sayyid Nusratul Haq from California. Sayyid Khurmir Nusratul Haq, grandson of Asadul Ulama, Hazrat Piro Murshad Marana, Hazrat Abu Sayyid Mahmud Murshad Mian Qibla, Rahmatullahi, and nephew of Hazrat Piro Murshad Maulana Abul Fatah Sayyid Nusrat Mian Sahab Qibla Tashurf Billahi, who happens to be my Murshad, Alhamdulillah, and he has inspired the entire community in Chicago, not just Chicago, but in North America, for last 30 years by providing his selfless service for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We, all of us, including me, are in debt to the service that the Murshid has given. So I'm so proud that Naushad can participate and represent the teachings of Nusrat Mian Mai Murshid, inshallah. Naushad was brought up in Southern California, but is currently living and resides in North Carolina. Before we get to the panelists, I just wanted to make sure that we set the background for this discussion. First, let's talk about the problem definition. What is that we're going to talk about, and what are we going to discuss for the next 90 minutes? How can we, the problem definition is how can we identify, build, and develop effective networks to help each other seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, for the sake of Allah, because we are Mahdavis and our primary goal In fact, primary goal of all Muslims or any believer is to seek closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And anything that we do is for that reason. And when we network, it would be and is going to be for that reason, as to how can we as a community of believers seek closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why do we need to do that? Our inspiration is obviously Quran itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in the Quran, Ba'da a'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, wal mu'minina wal mu'minatu ba'duhum awliya'u ba'd, ya'muruna bil ma'rufi wa yanhauna 'anil munkari wa yuqimuna as-salata wa yutuna az-zakata wa yuti'una Allah rasulahu ulaika sayyarahumullahu innallaha azizun hakim. And the rough translation or the shade of the meaning of that verse is, and as for the believers, both men and women, they are close unto one another. They all enjoin the doing of what is right and forbid the doing of what is wrong, and are constant in prayer, and render the purifying dues and pay heed unto Allah and His apostle. It is they upon whom Allah will bestow His grace. Verily, Allah is Almighty, wise. Sadaqallahu Mawlana al-Azim. We are also inspired by beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who in a hadith narrated by Numan al-Bashir radiallahu anhu reported, Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the believers in their mutual kindness, compassion, and sympathy are just like one body. When one of the limbs suffers, the whole body responds to it with wakefulness and fear. So as a community, as a ummah, if there is a believer who's in distress or need or whatever the case may be, it should affect the entire community. And when we are discussing about building effective networks, it is for that very purpose, so that we are connected, so that we know each other's pains and joys and share them, and inshallah grow spiritually to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, the inspiration won't be complete unless I give or share with all of you the nakhala of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. And as you all know, Imam Mahdi salam, sort of developed a community of believers by living with them, literally by living with them in dairas. And Imam Anna has said that the brothers, the inmates of the daira, should live with and help each other, so that the remembrance and the path of Allah becomes easy. So again, the purpose of building effective networks, of having the brotherhood and the closeness and the proximity, whether it is virtual or physical, with each other, is so that we help each other to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We help each other to become better believers. We help each other to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's essentially what we will be talking about. Obviously, the panelists will share their ideas and thoughts, and I will then come back and sort of investigate even and go deeper into the discussions to share as much as we can with all of you, so that we all can benefit from today's discussion. With that, and again, just to reiterate, some of the salient points of why we want to do effective networking is to establish excellence, as overriding perception and reality. We obviously want to have a common goal. We need to excel, not just personally, but as a community. So it's personal achievement versus excellence of the community itself. Interdependence, trust, and shared goals. We all need to be interdependent, specifically in this culture, when individualism is so important, is at the center. We all have to understand how best we need to be interdependent for the sake of Allah, and trust each other and share goals. Each one must teach one. So again, if I get to know something, learn something, and if I have spiritual enlightenment and I've become a better believer, obviously the best thing to do is, like we just read the surah from Tawbah, is to enjoin people to do the good and prohibit from doing the bad. We all need to come together and instigate social change. Without that, we won't be effective. It is very important to understand how we can help humanity in general to be effective Mahdavis and have an effective network. We need to ask people for help. Like I said, interdependence is very important. When there is need, a friend in need is a friend indeed, as you've heard. Replace that with the brother. A brother in need is a brother indeed. So we need to embody all these principles to make sure that our networks are effective. And nobody is less important than the other person. That's personally, I believe that, and I believe we all should share the same sentiment that no individual is more important. You know, everybody's at the center of this network, and we all can work together to become better and help each other become better. Last but not the least, it is absolutely important, and it is one of the core tenets of the Mahdavia Aqidah, that we have to be selfless, meaning everything that we do is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there is no need for personal gain and personal pride or personal achievements here. It is all for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With those salient points, I believe the panelists have plenty of rich and awesome information to share with you. And let me then pause for a second and inshallah stop sharing, so that I will first invite Sister Aisha Mahdi to give her presentation. And the format is actually, before we go there, let me just quickly share with you what the format of the discussion is. The format is as follows. We'll invite each panelist. They will come and give their 10 minutes, no more than that. So 10 minutes of introduction to the topic, their perspectives on the topic. We will first start with Sister Aisha Mahdi, because sisters first. Next, we'll invite Sayyidul Huda brother from UAE. He will talk, give his perspective for 10 minutes, and inshallah, Naushad. Once the panel is finished, then I'll come back and I'll sort of probe into their topics and questions to, again, get us more deeper into the understanding of how we need to effectively network. With that, let me pause here and inshallah invite Aisha. Sister Aisha, please come and share your presentation and give your 10 minutes. Jazakallah khair. Khalabe, please give Aisha the control.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
No, you are the co-host, Aisha.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I would like to thank MICC for this opportunity to participate, share, present, learn, and grow together, inshallah. Inshallah, everything beneficial that comes out of it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may Allah bless it. And if there are any shortcomings, then it's from my own self. I would like to start sharing the presentation slides. And I'm going to stop my video now, just for a minute. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created human beings, like the brother just mentioned, Brother Jawad, in a social form. We are social animals. And so when you look at networking, which is the topic of our discussion today, and you look at its definition, it's by definition, networking means the action or process of interacting with others to exchange information and develop professional or social contacts. And this basically iska matlab ye hai ki insan को बनाया इसीलिए गया है कि वो एक दूसरे से बात कर सके और एक दूसरे को जान सके. And this has been happening since time immemorial. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Hujurat, Surah 49, Ayah 13, the same exact thing, that, O mankind, we created you from a single pair of male and female, and made you into nations and tribes that you may know each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of Allah is he who is the most righteous. Again, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created insan so that insan can get to know one another and form bonds. And just the other day, while I was working on the presentation for today, and we all watch news, we know the current events, and we're familiar with the unfortunate Afghan crisis right now. I got a message saying that, there are these 3 kids, toddlers, who are in an LA hospital, Afghan families with many toddlers, kids showing up at the airport without their parents. There are 3 of them in our county, and we're looking for a Muslim foster care family. And my heart just sank because I don't know of Muslim foster care networking, and I was thinking about Mahdavia networking, and I'm thinking, my gosh, even like at the larger level, there is a lack of it. But subhanAllah, as I was just trying to find out more about who these kids were, and if you're a parent, that's the last thing you want, is to be away from your child. And I'm thinking about these parents, and I'm contacting whoever I can, trying to get more information. But subhanAllah, within hours, I got information, and I got people were calling, and they said, I can take care of 1 kid at least, and I know someone else who can take care of another kid. But in a few hours, I got the message that they were able to find a Muslim foster care family who, and I shared this message with everybody in the community, in our Mahdavia community, in our WhatsApp network, and they were able to find a Muslim foster care family who was able to take all these 3 toddlers in. That, to me, was an excellent example of networking and the miracle it can do, and how it can come in need in times like these. So that is the purpose of networking. That is the foundation of our networking. It is out of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love for us. Like Murshid said, Razmia mentioned earlier, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us in a network. Within us is a complex, highly integrated, and well-linked system that works in harmony, and then we feel normal and at our best. And in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah has created humans to get to know one another. And again, in the ladies' session earlier, the sister was talking about the importance of preserving and protecting what we already have, which is very precious, because the other person or the other nation or the other tribe has what is missing in us. And that's why we need to know one another and exist in harmony. And like Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says in the hadith that was mentioned earlier just now, that the ummah is like one body. If one part hurts, then the entire body is going to hurt. So the networking, as we understand, is from the Quran, the Sunnah. And Mahdi Maud alayhi salam works in a connection, and it all begins with a seed. And these are our families, our couples, basically our center. It, like, again, going back to the ayah 49:13, it all begins with a single pair. And networking should revolve around families, parents, and couples. How? So currently, and since COVID, we are mostly connecting online and through our phones using the various social media apps. On WhatsApp alone, there are multiple groups focused on various areas that are religious, social, educational, professional, etc. And we all know this. And some of us may be even overwhelmed with it, maybe even zoomed out. And this is not to discredit the important work that is being done. For example, just amongst our Mahdavia women, just with the women I'm connected with, a much needed Mahdavia school is being run online, both locally by a Sister Sadia, and as well as from another organization called The Village, along with other social activities for kids. Like I know the most recent one was something called like a baking social activity that was done. There's book clubs or story reading, and we have book clubs, and I'm sure there's so many other activities that are going on right now with the intention of networking, getting to know each other, and from the comfort of our home. And it was also in COVID, and because of the pandemic, that I got involved with a local parents group for about a couple years now, and I've learned a lot about networking at a local level just in the last 2 years. So I just want to talk a little bit more about that process. So I got involved as a result of a complaint I had to file against my daughter's teacher. And, you know, as individuals, we feel like that we can tolerate a lot of things, but we draw the line when it comes to our children, especially when they're at a tender age of needing to be protected. So in the class, I wear hijab, and we were attending this local Mommy and Me classes. And after a year or so into the program, unfortunately, because of budget cuts, we lost our favorite teacher. And the one that was replaced, that replaced her, was openly racist and discriminating. And I was like, I am here with my child, and this is your attitude. I can't imagine leaving her with you under your care when I'm not there. So I took it up to the higher authorities. And fortunately or unfortunately, that was a good time. With everything else going on around the world with the BLM and everything. And so I got invited to a parent-led initiative that the current administration was pushing forward from top down. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the structure of this network and its experience I had with it, because I think a lot of it can be learned and translated into our own community. And we can benefit from learning more about our local government bodies and just in general how they network. So this parent-led network begins with parents attending local classes offered by anything around them, any public building, organization around them. It could be a library, learning centers, etc. And at these classes, parents are invited for your PTO version of a parent get-together, where they provide, childcare and hear about your concerns. And this meeting is held at your local county and led by a staff member who is open, taking notes, good listener, etc. And this is the beginning of planting the seed, if you will. And taking a note of the parents, and they're constantly watching and taking a note of the parents, families attending the session, for example, and announcing that there will be another meeting just to hear concerns from from others. And from this meeting, or after a series of these meetings, parent leaders for the county are picked based on their participation and ideas and etc. And these leaders are hired as parent leaders of the county, and this group is then led by another staff member whose job is to facilitate meetings, plan them, connect with parents, hear them out, and come up with projects. This is the seed at county level. But this small group does not work in isolation. So just like this image here of the cogs, it is connected parallelly, horizontally, vertically, inside out, and in all sorts of different background ways to other counties and organizations that are doing the same kind of work. And I'm gonna try to explain that in Urdu, just real quick. So जब parents बच्चों के साथ जो local classes attend करते, वहाँ से there are the staff, जो teachers रहते, वो लोग meetings organize करते हैं, and और वो लोग invite करते दूसरे parents को आने के लिए और उनको बताने के लिए कि आप, और उनसे पूछने के लिए कि आपका एक्सपीरियंस कैसा रहा और क्या प्रॉब्लम्स हैं और कैसा हम इनको इम्प्रूव कर सकते उसके, एंड देन वहाँ से यू स्टार्ट पेरेंट्स का नेटवर्क स्टार्ट होता. So that's in a gist. And then depending on budget, participation, and other factors, some of these organizations are more active than others, much like our current networking, the Mahdavia networking. However, some are paid while most are volunteers, unlike our networking. However, what is common amongst all of them that I noticed in these couple years are a few factors. Number one, there's a passion for change. Like Murshid Sarfraz Mahdi Mia mentioned earlier today, this need for change, that we're not okay with the status quo. And that passion carries them throughout this project. And these are professionals who are, they could be your local doctors, nurses, engineers, and they're spending their extra time in organizations like this, volunteering as parents to bring about a change. And alhamdulillah, we have so much of that passion, especially in our Mahdavia Sisters Network, locally, and I know even MICC. This is what I'm mostly connected with. I see so many initiatives, so many mothers taking charge, trying to do things for their children and teach them on their own and connect with others. And this is all volunteer work. And I know also brothers run some kind of a professional online network. I think it's called coding or something like that. But there is passion for sure in our community. And these are compassionate individuals, even at county level, government level, who run the show. But the second factor that they have, which we don't, and we need to invest in, is money, funds. And these are not just funds by the government, although depending on the current administration is very encouraging for community organizing and local projects. But it can't, maybe the current administration is not, but the counties still have money and individuals still take it upon themselves to fund these programs. Only what we would call is for the sake of Allah in our translation. because they just want to give back to the community and pay forward, because they want to see their children grow up in a better environment than they did. So for example, the organization that I work with hired a consultant, a life coach, who runs these meetings. And that's their job. And that's what they're getting paid for, is to come up with different ways to keep parents engaged and encouraged and keep the momentum up, plan meetings, etc. And the rest of the people are probably not getting paid or are on stipends, etc. But there's always at least one paid position, which makes all the difference, because this one paid position is the root, is that seed, is that glue that's holding everyone else around them together. So like you see in this picture, some images are popping up more than the others. So the ones that are paid with their good intention, with compassion, also are able to take this job very seriously, because they don't have to worry about focusing on something else. And they don't have to run to another job for another meeting. And we know this is also sunnah. We also know this from, I think there is a hadith or a story of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu and Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, people are waiting for Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he's not there after he becomes a Khalifa. And they're like, where is he? And he's found at his store or business or something. And so he says, well, of course, I have to feed my family. So then Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu takes it upon himself to pay him from Baitul Mal, so he doesn't have to. So this is, it works to invest in the community, to have funds so you can hire these coaches, these consultants, whose job is only to keep the program, like the sister mentioned earlier, to keep this treasure that we have running and maintain it. And I know there are many Muslims and Mahdavis itself who are wonderful consultants and coaches, and who would love to do this work and get paid for it. And so with that, I'm gonna end my talk, but inshallah in the panel discussion, I would love to talk more about how we can come up with a more efficient networking system for our community, and would like to stop here, inshallah. Jazakallah khair so much for the opportunity.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Aisha. Let's quickly keep rolling, and my request is for panelists to keep within 10 minutes, because otherwise we will run out of time to discuss, have an interactive discussion. Brother Sayyidul Huda, can you please take 10 minutes to give your background on the topic?
Yeah, can you able to share my screen?
Sure. You should be able to share your screen, yeah.
I'll make you the co-host.
Screen is coming up or no?
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah.
You can see. Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. First of all, I would like to thank Almighty Allah for giving us another opportunity to discuss this very important topic of networking, which is becoming very critical now because of the things changing globally. And then second of all, I want to thank MICC and pray for them to give them highest ajr for organizing these kind of conferences relentlessly without caring for any of the situations that's happening. they switch from the local to global, and so it's a great thing from them. So I pray for Almighty Allah to give all the people involved in this organizing the events highest ajr. So what I'm going to discuss is the criticality of having a Mahdavia network, because in 2015 also during the conference we discussed to have a network. We did elaborate discussion was happened, but after that we tried to develop a network which couldn't came into being. But now the conditions have become different, that it is become a criticality now that we need to have a network. I'll just put some points that why it has become critical. And because the theme of the conference also, one of the objectives that was mentioned was to have a central organization, so it is becoming critical and critical. As we very well know, one of the saying of Imamuna was Dar ittifaq nusad dinas, dar nifaq hazmate dinast. So it says in unity there is victory, in hypocrisy there is defeat. So we have to adapt this, in a practical life. Current scenario is, it's a reverse scenario. We are not, we are working in silos. We are not at all united. So we are working against the saying of Imam. Just to give you the current scenario, if you might be knowing, there are many indications of Qiyamah becoming evident. Like I'm in Middle East, so I can very much relate to it. The deserts are becoming green. If you see Dubai, Saudi Arabia, it's all green cities now. Then the tallest tower, if you know, the Burj Khalifa has been the tallest for like 8-10 years. There is no other building has come up. So these are some of the indications that's been happening. Water streams in desert. If you see Dubai, it's all water, canals, and now even Saudi Arabia has started to do that. So these are becoming evident. We cannot ignore. It is proving that our faith, we are on the right path. What we say is Mahdi Salam has come and gone, so it is proving that point. And but some people are still waiting, and I know of some events that's happening. Some people are searching that all these signs are becoming evident. So Mr. Mahdi might have come and gone. Who was it and all? I know of a conference in Pakistan that they wanted to have this one. And I have some of my Shia friends, I got messages now. They are pitching that it is a time for the second Imam to come out of the hiding. So this is all happening, but we being on the right path, still unable to bring the third to the world, So I feel this is one of the point we are not able to do is because we don't have a central thing or a network or anything, So I will share more on this in the second slide. As we have been pointed out and is evident, now Mahdawis are there in all the parts of the globe. Previously, we used to be limited in India and Pakistan. But if you see now, most of the countries in Europe, North America, and they are spread across over the last so many decades. When they come there, they have different cultures. They adopt to the different economic structures. Then they have identity crisis. Like I also feel many times like the scenario that what to do, what to not to do, because it's a different culture. And then once they come, like I'm here in Dubai for 30 years, my children grew up here. So same way, maybe North America. So the whole new generation has come into being who have no exposure to our daira or the traditional one. And now, as I heard, many new converts are also coming in the community. We are marrying people from the other religions and all. So these all the people, they have no exposure to the dairas. They have no exposure to our true religious practices. There was one incident. Somebody had come to India and they were in the Bahariam, and there was the after the Bahariam, there was the Tasbih. And I think because these children were not exposed, they said, why they are shouting? No, it is an incident, it might be, we can say the parent has not taught and all, but it is, they don't have exposure. So this brings in a new set of requirements because of this new generation and the new converts and the new things. We cannot still keep on flogging our traditional methods, traditional writing, traditional literatures, because these people have no exposure to that system. So it brings in a new set of requirement. So we are currently, if you see, we are just trying ourselves, trying to sustain, like MICC doing this, we are doing this. There are some organizations who are doing the locally work there, just catering to the local requirements, whatever they can with whatever resources they have. But I feel these are inadequate. It's not adequately done because it is done locally. So I think it is inadequate now. And from the community side, no effort is there to address this current requirement. I have been hearing the jalsas and during this conference, all the speeches, it's all the traditional ways being spoken about. I don't know, the children or the younger generation who are not at all attracted to it and not at all going to be interested if we keep on going that way. So it has to be, the requirements have to be addressed in that way. And what we say might be before there was a gap, like the North America, they had a different requirement. Maybe in Middle East, it's a requirement. But now currently, because of this globalization, the social media and everything, the requirements have become same. Everybody wants to have the faith in the current context, the modern context, then we need to convey, the perspective of the religion in a uniform and targeted way. There is so much confusion if somebody goes and hears the various speeches or the concept on the YouTube and the web. It's a different perspective. Then we need to develop in-house resources. These are all requirements if you take for India, for Middle East, for Europe, or anywhere wherever our communities are there. We need, this is all now become a common requirement. Before it was like separate, there was a gap, but now due to the social media and everything, it's become a very common requirement across the board. We have been talking about this a lot. Some literature has been done in English, but it is again, in the traditional way it is done. It is not as per the current requirements. Then, there are so many issues that's come up, and we need to resolve this in a current requirement, not the, so this is all what I'm trying to stress again and again, is a requirements or the across the communities, not linked to some communities. What I see the advantages of the network is to establish an identity. As I mentioned in the first slide, we are still, if even after so many signs of Qiyamah becoming evident, we are still not able to claim or prove or stress that our Imamuna Mahdi Mausalam have come and gone, because we don't have an identity. I have some friends, the Bohri, the network, they're so strong and they're so staunch they do because of the network they have. They have a global network. They identify themselves anywhere they go. They have the link channel. They get help and everything. So that is a kind of that is one of the reason I feel that it is one of the critical point, why we need a network. One more thing is now we are working in silos. Somebody just translated one book in English. They just did it in a traditional way. It's done. I don't know how it is going to be useful. How many of the percentage of our Mahdavis are going to be benefited by that? So we need to. There are resources available, but it's scattered. With the network, we can have some plan and some project, and we can use these resources to get the literature or whatever we want to do as per our requirement, not just do for the heck of it, just we translated in English, And this way, the people who are doing the work, we can enhance their productivity and, we can benefit. They are just doing the work because they feel something has to be done, But if we have a network and we cooperate and we say this is our condition of the current generation, we need to do this kind of work. So there, I think we can utilize their resources better. Again, when having a network, as we are discussing, we change the perspective, and our talimat, alhamdulillah, are so modern. So much people are looking now for peace and tranquility, and they are stressed out, and so our zikr, all the practices are so modern, so that we can, put. So as I am repeating the thing again, that once we have a network, we expect these projects or these advantages that we can get. One more thing is there are a lot of issues back in our hometowns, India, Pakistan, where if in Pakistan now the Mahdavia is shrinking. We had only earlier 2-3 dairas, now only 1 daira, 1 murshad. Also, so there is nothing happening. FRA committee tried to do something, but still, single-handedly, battling this kind of massive thing is difficult. So if you have a network, we can revive, we can do many things. So this is one of the advantages. As I mentioned, that we need to create this identity to in these times, it is very critical that we say Mahdi Maud salam has come and gone, and because our children are, there is no identity. It's a struggle to explain to the people what is the concept of Mahdi, what is so important in our Islam you have to do. So if you have an identity, then it will be very easy. We can say we are a Mahdavi, and everybody is aware of what is the concept and all. And now due to this, now the current scenario of the Wahhabi and all, this concept is getting, toned down and down. So it is one of the important concepts, but it is going away. The theme of the conference, it was mentioned that we need to have a central network, central thing, and we are appealing to the Murshadeen and the scholars of the community that we should do, but who is hungry? We are hungry. They are not hungry. We need this. Our children, we need this for our children. Why they should be bothered? So if we don't do, who will do? If we don't do now, when we will do? So this is very critical now that we should have the network in place to face these challenges and further. Thanks a lot for your time.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Uda. I can relate to your emotions. I am fully appreciative of the problems that you have highlighted. And, the first thing to solving any problem is to know the problem.
Exactly.
I believe you have articulated very well what the problems are. And it is definitely a crisis right now with respect to our identity and our children and the engagement from our children. But before we get in, inshallah, we'll come back to all the important things that you have mentioned in our discussion. Before that, let me bring in finally our third panelist, Naushad. And Naushad, please take 10 minutes to share the background on the topic.
Okay, inshallah, if you will allow me to share my screen. Oh, here we go.
You're the host now.
Okay. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم حمد ومصليا السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. First of all, I'd like to also thank MICC and the organizers of this conference for giving me an opportunity to speak, and my fellow panelists and our esteemed moderator for inviting me to be part of this event. I think we had some very interesting and important viewpoints shared from different perspectives. First, from Sister Aisha, we learned some of the practical logistical techniques that we might use to build an effective network of Mahdavis. And then we heard a very passionate explanation of why such a network is important. We do have a responsibility as a community for safeguarding these teachings and spreading them to the next generation. I think my talk is going to be more about the intentions which we should be driven by, the niyat we should have, and the sort of overarching philosophy we should keep in mind as we put these networks into place. And so looking back, as we mentioned sort of in the intro, the Daira for me is an ideal model for the Mahdavia network. In my opinion, it is the perfect example of what a Mahdavia network ought to look like and how it can be put into practice. And so I want to sort of examine the characteristics of the Daira and see if we can retain and preserve some of those characteristics in whatever future community networks we decide to put into practice. So we could start by asking the basic question of what is a Daira? And obviously I'm just a layperson, I'm not a scholar at all. I'm sure there are many, many more qualified people who can explain these concepts to you, but hopefully I can sort of give you, with my limited knowledge, a kind of limited basic explanation of these ideas. The Daira historically has been a small group of individuals and families who live in close proximity with one another, with the Murshid as the center of that community group. So often it was actually like a physically demarcated space, like an enclosed space. And people lived inside the Daira and they worshipped inside the Daira and they had a community. And when the Daira moved, everyone in the Daira moved with the Daira. They didn't have a connection to the land per se, or to particular national identity, or even like the neighborhood they happened to be in. Their connection was the Daira itself. Their sense of community was the Daira itself. And so they moved with their Murshid, with the Daira, if the Daira moved. And so the Daira represented in and of itself a core community unit. And each of these Dairas, because the Murshideen themselves are connected to one another spiritually, each of these Daira then become a node in a network of other Dairas. And so our Mahdavia community as a whole is linked through our position within the Daira and our connection to our Murshid. So this is basically how the Mahdavia society has been organized historically. And as we've mentioned, the system of the Daira has become degraded to a certain extent. It is sort of no longer a physical enclosed area. It's kind of like a diffuse organization of people now. But I think we can still use some of the same characteristics and philosophies to inform ourselves as we build other community networks and organizations, okay? The main point that I want to make is that the Murshid was at the center of the Daira, as the center of the community, in a position of authority, and as a leader, a guide, and a teacher for his specific community group. And so within the Daira, we actually had every single member living in the Daira had a spiritual connection to their Murshid. And they had ties of camaraderie and brotherhood and sisterhood and social identity between themselves and the other members around them. And so within the Daira, we have two basic objectives that were both met. On the one hand, we had a sense of identity and belonging, a sense of community, a sense of togetherness, just by living in close proximity to other believers. We have this concept of Sohbat-e Sadiqeen, which was beautifully explained in one of the earlier sessions in the conference. And so that aspect of community building was already taken care of. And aside from that, and more importantly, the primary purpose of the daira was the spiritual connection between the murid and the murshid, and the journey towards spiritual attainment. Okay, so the main reason why the daira existed was as a vehicle or as a zariya to assist the members that lived in the daira upon this journey toward Didar Khuda. And the murshid was and is the teacher and guide upon that journey. And so I think it's very important for us to retain and maintain that at the front of our minds. Whatever community, organization, whatever network we put up and stand up, we should have the murshid at the center of it. And we should make sure that we instill in the members of that community, of our community, that their goal and purpose and function is to achieve spiritual attainment with the help and guidance of their murshid. I think that's extremely important. And there's definitely a need to sort of engage the younger community, get them involved in their religion, get them excited to be part of a cultural group, give them a social identity. But at the same time, we also have to imbue them with this sense of the spiritual requirements that they're under, that their goal and objective is to achieve, an awareness of God's presence in their daily life through the senses of their physical body, right? And the fact that the murshid is not just some authority figure that's distant and far away, but that he should be a close and personal connection that's helping you to fulfill the main and most important purpose of why you are here in this life. And so I think that's my humble contribution to this conversation would basically be that we do not want to lose sight of the spiritual aspects of our religion. And we have examples of successful social networks from our own tradition that we can look to for guidance, and that we can revive and bring back up into the front of people's minds. And so we have an existing network in place called Ijma'i Murshideen Mahdavia, which is a very, very long-standing network of murshideen who would collaborate with one another to face, social and religious issues and to basically solve problems for the community. We have Majlis Ulema Mahdavia Hind, which is founded by my grandfather, Pir Murshid Maulana Hazrat Abu Sayyid Mahmud, Murshid Mian Qibla Rahmatullahi alayh. This is a network of Mahdhavi scholars from all over India who came together, both Murshids and non-Murshids, who came together to, serve that function of being sort of the religious experts of the community. So these are two examples of Mahdhavi networks that are already in place that we could revive and make more effective for our current time. And at the same time, as we stand up more local, more immediate networks in our individual communities, we should keep in mind the teachings of our forefathers and the spiritual importance, and keep that goal and objective of that spiritual attainment and the connection with our murshideen at the front of our minds. And so those are my short remarks, and then I will pass it back to the rest of the panel.
Jazakallah khair, Naushad. Thank you so much for that excellent reminder. I believe that all of us, to some degree, have been separated from that concept. We have only heard about, that closeness in the dairas, that demarcated place where people can participate, live, eat together. It's definitely something that we aspire for, and inshallah, in some shape or form, there might be an opportunity for us to think about how we can implement that in our current societies, whether it is UAE or North America or even India, to that matter, because I don't believe such a demarcated space where people live together for the sake of Allah and to attain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists today. And if it doesn't exist, why doesn't it exist and what can be done? So that's excellent. So for the remainder 25 minutes, roughly, or 20 minutes, what I would like to do is, just to set some ground rules, I would request the panelists to wait for me to give you the chance to speak. So while one panel is speaking, please do not interrupt that person, let that panelist speak. And I will be happy to come back to you and ask you the questions. And the format is as follows. I was furiously taking notes as you guys were giving your perspectives on the topic. And I'm going to specifically ask questions to examine more your ideas, your thoughts about what you have presented, to sort of further elaborate. And I will first ask the person who has presented it, then I will give a chance for both of you or the other two panelists to answer about those same points. And then I'll go back in the same order that we had the panelists speak. So inshallah, let's begin. And I would like to first start with Sister Aisha Mahdi. And one thing I would like to ask Aisha is, you raised a very, very, very important point. And you said that our community hasn't made the necessary investments that you're seeing in your local county networks that are being made. Specifically, you highlighted that there are paid people who come in and who make sure that they are the glue, they are the center of the discussions, and they carry the work forward. Why do you think, or what is the reason that our community haven't made those investments, and what can we do to make those investments?
I think I was contemplating on that and reflecting on that myself. And I think there are investments at some level. I know that organizations have some form of donations. Our organization has it, for example, and I know MICC does. But what happens at the local level is these funds and investments, they're audited. And there's an entire report that is passed through and forward and up and down from national to local. So the people who are spending $1 know exactly where it's going and how it's being used, and they get that report. And even if they don't, they know that there's a very strong auditing that happens with their money. So they have that trust. So when we go, for example, with a project, and we go to our local organizations or businesses, and we ask them to invest in our projects, we give them that assurance. So that's what I would say is not there, maybe at our level, in our Mahdavia networks.
Got it. So let me quickly sort of translate that in a more clear way so that our audience can get some understanding of that. You're basically saying that in your work at the county level in networking, there is a lot of transparency on where the resources are coming from and where they're being spent. And there is also transparency about the priorities being put on where the resources are being spent. And in our community, we completely lack that. We lack any transparency in the process. We lack any prioritization as to where the resources should be appropriately spent that actually addresses the needs and the problems of the community. So it's almost ad hoc and it is arbitrary. There is no program, there is no mission, there is no common goal. And hence, you are clearly pointing out that needs to be fixed. We need to instill transparency. We need to make sure that there is priorities properly put in place and priorities given to projects and programs that actually do solve real problems. and that's not being done, and you feel like that's where the opportunity is. Fantastic. But one more thing I would like to highlight from your discussion, which was very excellent, was that there was this idea that you shared about how you were fighting certain stereotypes of what your identity is and what the identity of your daughter was that was being questioned by the teachers, and how you had to address it and solve the problem, or step in. And that's when you realized, oh my God, I could be involved and I could do more for my children and also for the community. Do you believe that today there are necessary steps being taken by us as a community, as Mahdavia community, to fight the stereotypes, specifically around who we are, what our aqidah is, and how we interact and sort of place ourselves in as an identifying Mahdavi amongst Muslims and generally in our network, in our neighborhoods in our country? Do you think there is an opportunity for us to fight the stereotypes, and what can be done as we network together to fight the stereotypes?
I think there are opportunities, and I do see people pointing out stereotypes or discriminations. I've seen it come up in different forms within our Mahdavia circles, in different dairas that whatever exist today, or even culturally, without going into names and things like that. I think we're all familiar with it. And I feel like people are ready to point it out more today than maybe a few years ago, or maybe my parents' generation. And I believe Brother Huda mentioned or tried to highlight some of those issues as well. And it links to the first question that you asked, but I think it hasn't been prioritized, talking about discrimination and stereotypes, because we haven't prioritized networking. So one of the basic things that this whole, we're doing a project right now at a national level, but it started with somebody saying, come, I want to talk, I want to hear from you what your concerns are with this teacher.
Yeah.
And so for us, that would be like, oh, I saw you in this group or this session right now. And a week later, whoever was in this session, whoever attended it, we're having a meeting just to hear your concerns. And this is a consultant. This is a third party.
Yeah.
They are not going to judge you.
Fantastic. So that's great. I love that answer. And, it's such an important topic. I think we can talk for a long time on that and still won't have all the answers, because it's such a difficult topic. As you know, America in general is struggling with racism and stereotypes and issues of minorities. All that are relevant, and they become more relevant for us because we are such a small community. We are isolated to a greater extent. And that becomes so much more enhanced. That struggle for an identity becomes so much more enhanced. So it's a very important topic. Inshallah, we'll talk about that more later. But before I let you go, this is the final question for you. And I think it is, again, one of the very, very important points that you brought up was that the sisters you had mentioned are running online schools and are able to come together to learn, teach, and share the faith with our younger generation. I feel like that is very important, and being online has provided a space for the sisters that was not necessarily available in the masajids. I, for one, am guilty as a male. I'm guilty that we have disenfranchised women from our communities and centers. We haven't given them the position of authorities. We haven't engaged with them, invited them, and they're looked down upon. So you guys, more commendably, I'm appreciating that you have actually found a different space where you can become more effective. Can you please share with the audience here how you find yourselves as women being effective in upbringing of your children, specifically the spiritual upbringing of your children, that now that you're connected virtually?
Yeah, I think, yeah, you said it exactly the way it is. This has been a blessing in that it's opened a platform for many sisters to just take initiative, start what they've been wanting to start for years within a click of a button. And, but I also know that a lot of them who are especially running the shows are able to do a better job with the support of their husbands, children, fathers, and so they're not alone. So there is a very strong family standing behind these women who are trying to get into the space of that, like you said, that has not been available until now, but they're able to get into Mahdavia teachings, for example, do their research, come up with classes, content, and give it to the kids, their kids, the kids of the community, talk to other women who are Mahdavis, and alhamdulillah for this space. I feel like I have to mention that there's also a lot of support of the men in their life.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. So again, the action items, let me just repeat before I go on to the other panelists. Action items, make sure there's proper investments. We haven't invested enough resources, prioritize them properly to solve specific problems. Help create networks that can fight stereotypes, talk about it openly, let your children speak openly, respond to them, listen to them the more you can. That's another action item. And third, which is very important, is women are very important in propagating the knowledge specifically to their children. And it's very important to allow them, give them space, give them support, like Sister Aisha said. So these are excellent presentation and points that you brought up, action items, and Jazakallah khair. But before I move to the next panelist, I would like to give an opportunity for both of you to comment on the questions that I asked Sister Aisha. Brother Huda, if you have any comments, do you want to share for 30 seconds or less than 1 minute, please?
It's a different perspective that she has brought. So if we all what the opening remarks have been from Naushad and Sister Aisha, if we combine all, I think we are going towards the direction to have a kind of network that will benefit the community. If we combine, because everybody have a different perspective. So Sister Aisha is coming from a different perspective. Naushad has a different perspective. So I think we are moving now like different directions, different perspectives. So I think it's going great.
Jazakallah khair. Naushad, do you have any comments on what Sister Aisha had mentioned and the question that I asked?
Yes, I would just like to express my agreement that when we talk about actually transmitting the knowledge, it's going to come from the parents. And you're right, your mother has a huge impact. I mean, we all know the saying that the mother's lap is the first school. And so yeah, I really commend the sisters for taking the initiative. The fact that they had to take the initiative on their own is an indication of why we need a centralized network to help bring these things up to the front and direct them in an organized way. So they should definitely be commended for taking that first step. It's not easy, and you open yourself up to criticism and all these other things. So I wish them all the success in the world.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair. So let's then quickly go to Brother Huda and ask him a few questions. You actually touched upon something very, very important, and I would like to ask you more to sort of share your thoughts further on that. You have said that today our younger generations are disconnected, or you don't feel that they're engaged at the level they should be because we are sort of stuck in traditions and we are not able to provide them something that is more meaningful in a way that they can relate to. Especially coming from a different culture, they have different perspectives, different, completely a different place where they have grown up. Space and place, space and time, both is different than what we had grown as an immigrant community. Please explain to me what you mean by something that is traditional and our children are not able to connect with something that is traditional.
Yeah, I will just take the example of the literature. If you see our literature, actually, we are in the now, I think, the third version of our literature. Our traditional literature was having the way it was written, was very elaborate, and there were a lot of justifications and other things. But the current scenario, the third version that we are having now, is much better. It is more simpler, more simplified. But still, the generation that is now there is having a different kind of their technology, and they are like into gaming and different. They have a different mindset, So we need to. Yes, tell me.
Do you think, as Mahdavis, people of Mahdavi faith, we are lacking behind in providing our children new tools, or we haven't retooled our methods of learning? That's what you're saying, essentially, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that the literature that is available to them, the speeches that are being done, are not at all relating to them. It's very difficult for them to understand. I'll give you one example. The lack of during a jalsa in our place, I wanted my son to recite a poetry, a naat. But our naats are like bit Urdu, and they were a bit difficult. So I thought, why not we have a naat in English? I look around, there is nothing. I talked to some of our poets, they said there's nothing available, 100%. So this is the way I'm saying example, this is what is a disconnect.
100%. So I cannot agree with you more, and I'm so thankful that you have brought it up. We need serious retooling. Exactly. In fact, I think we must change our lexicon. Exactly. A lot of our children today do not even know the terminology. We can't even get them to embrace Urdu because Urdu is not their primary language. We give them our lexicon in Farsi. So it is completely, I agree. I'm not saying that, by the way, I don't think the audience should take away from this discussion that we're not saying learning Urdu is not important, but learning Farsi is not important. What we're doing is we are separating something that is essential from something that is, as an voluntarily or extended language. What we are doing is by making things that are not essential, we are creating barriers for them to engage, to embrace our aqidah. And that's the fact. I'm so glad that Brother Huda brought it up.
I want to stress again one point is that it is common. It has become common across the globe now. If you see in India also, our children are going to English medium schools. Many of them don't know Urdu now, and it's become difficult. Previously, it was different that they used to have Urdu at home. Like when we were grown up, we were taught Urdu at home. Though school, we were not taught Urdu, and we had a good atmosphere that we used to do that. So that is also lacking now. So
got it. So action item. I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off because I have 3 minutes left, and I'm giving a lot of time. So action item for you from your discussion and your thoughts and your expertise is to make sure that we start retooling, understand what is essential, and separate essential from what is the need today, and focus on the need and provide our children what they need to embrace the aqidah, inshallah, or bring them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make them more spiritual. Inshallah. Naushad, coming back to you, man, you brought up a very important topic, but you sort of presented, and you even said, I'm glad you said it's an ideal. The daira is the ideal, but ideal is not real. What I am asking you is, what do we do to make the ideal real? Or where do we start from? What is real today in what we can call ourselves, or what we can associate ourselves towards dairas? What is real today? And what is the first step we can take to get toward that ideal?
Jawad, sorry to interrupt, but I need to add one thing that will help Naushad. What he told about the daira and the Majlis Ulma-e Hind, that is no more like functional, So, and then there is two requirement that the dairas, the traditional dairas and the networks that we had, the Murshideen networks are not functional now. And then we have the new generation. So that is the take for Naushad. Thank you.
Yes, so in terms of how we can make these things practical, we've heard some really good examples for how we might take lessons from other successful networks, non-religious networks, and borrow those techniques and ideas to build a successful Mahdavia network. But in terms of how to practically introduce your children or to spread the knowledge of our religion to the younger generation, I think it has to start around the dinner table. It has to start with the parents. We cannot put all of the onus on the Murshideen to come into our homes and teach our children everything they need to know. Coming as a younger person with very young children, I have not had to practically put these things into practice myself. So maybe I'll have to answer the question again in 10 or 15 years and might have a different answer. But as far as I'm concerned, the way that I learned my religion, it was in everyday conversations with my dad. There was never like, okay, from this time to this time, we're going to have a Sunday school and you're going to sit still and I'm going to teach you about zakat and all of these major concepts. Literally, I remember one of the most important conversations I had with my dad about religion happened in the waiting room of a mechanic shop as we waited for his tire to get fixed because he got a flat tire. And an idea came into my mind, and I asked him a very kind of controversial question about how zakat works and how Dila al-Khuda works. And he gave me a response just on the fly, sitting there in that room. And he probably doesn't remember that conversation, but it is a core part of my iman. And so these kinds of things, we have to prepare ourselves to help our children. So our children may not speak the language of the Murshideen. We have to learn that language ourselves so that we can translate for them. We speak the language of our children. So I think that's really how this is going to work. If it is going to work, I think that's really how it's going to work. We cannot expect the Murshideen to change everything about themselves. We have to be seekers and humbly seek and put ourselves in a position to benefit from this information. Aside from that, I mean, in spite of what I've just said, there are Murshideen who are actively learning English, taking classes on top of all their other responsibilities, taking classes to learn English because they know that their daira requires it. And so I don't know if we have an excuse to say that there's a language barrier. I think we have to learn the language. We have to try our best to teach the language to our kids. I mean, you look at other religious communities and other cultural groups, the Chinese, for instance, every single Chinese kid under 3 years old speaks Chinese. They don't speak only English. There's very few Chinese kids that I know who are not connected to their mother language. And that happens because it's insisted upon in the home. And so that is a starting point, I think. Definitely something that we have to take.
Actually, yeah, I love your answer. I love your answer. And what you're saying is essentially to start building that daira at their dinner table. You're imbued the knowledge in your everyday living. And that's the start. That's the real part of how you start that. And eventually, inshallah, that nourishment, that everyday nourishment will lead to greater things. And those greater things can be coming up with that idea. But let me actually ask you one more thing, because you sort of touched on this in your discussion. I'm sorry we're a few minutes late. As a moderator, I failed to end this session in time, and I apologize to all of you, to the listeners, and may Allah forgive me. But this is such an important topic, and I feel like we can talk about this so much. So one more question I would like to ask you is, you did say that, the central figure of the daira is the murshid. Obviously, we all know that and we all appreciate that. But the question I have is, what do you think about the scholarship of the murshidin itself? And the reason I'm asking is, today, our children are very educated, alhamdulillah, like yourself, young American Mahdavi who's born and raised here. You guys have learned critical thinking, reasoning, psychology. You have such a vast background. And you surround yourself around somebody who is very singular in their knowledge. They're all about religion, deen, daira, and Mahdaviyat. Do you believe that there is an opportunity to establish better scholarships within Murshideen? And in fact, the reason I'm asking is, can we develop that scholarship within our individual communities? Why aren't young American Mahdavis who are born and raised here becoming Murshids? What are we missing? How do we develop the scholarship that is so important and necessary for us here?
So this is a difficult question to answer. I don't know why we don't have more American-born Murshideen. Maybe there's a generation that's yet to rise up that may still happen at some point. But I think you're right. We are reliant on an older generation of Murshideen, though, in Hyderabad, I mean, a lot of the speakers today have been younger than me, or the same age as I am. And they've presented beautiful information that's extremely helpful. In terms of like critical thinking and these other ideas, how to sort of do dawah, which is something that you will find from these YouTube imams. They have taken classes and written books about how to present their religion to people who are not already sort of indoctrinated into it. That is not a mentality that our Murshideen have had traditionally. Our Murshideen are used to speaking with people who have a foundation of Iman, who have been absorbing the religion in the air they've been breathing and the water they've been drinking from birth.
So the question I have is, do you believe that if we build this effective networks where we are all coming to, doing things for a common goal, if we put that in place, and I mean, obviously we're talking about networking here, so I want to bring that point home, is that doing that, do you think will develop that scholarship within our communities? Is there an action item for us to take away?
I hope so. I mean, I hope that is true. I mean, it would be ideal if somebody who was born in America would one day, become a murshid and serve that role directly. In the meantime, we are seeing huge efforts of people who were not born here to come and take up dairas in this country and basically move mountains in order to preserve some form of religious identity. I think the onus is on the younger community to step up and to do something. And if a murshid does rise out of the ranks of American-born Mahdavis, it will be from our children's generation. And so whatever preparation we have to do, it needs to start now. And traditionally, the way a murshid comes to be is through sohbat with an existing murshid, right? So if you're saying that you want an American-born murshid, you need to teach your kids who their murshid is. Mm-hmm. And you need to teach them how to develop a close personal relationship with whoever their murshid is. And only then do we have a chance. Traditionally speaking, the way a murshid comes to be is they become a murshid at a young age because they've had that close connection with an existing murshid. Usually it's like their parent, right? But I think it's important to teach our kids who their murshid is and to make sure that they actually have a close. I mean, I was very lucky. My murshid was my uncle.
Yeah.
Right. I had a close connection with him from the beginning. And, I didn't have to be told that he was an important person. I was in awe of his intellect from a young age, even before I realized his religious position or what he was meant to teach me. I remember having that close connection. And so maybe I'm speaking from a position of advantage, but it doesn't change the fact that we have to do our best to foster those relationships. So we ourselves have to be connected to our murshid. Our children have to know who their murshid is. And through that connection, I think that's the only way forward. And like you said, if we set up social and community structures that have spiritual attainment as one of the stated objectives, and we take tangible steps in that direction, it's possible.
Inshallah.
It's an uphill battle, but we can do it.
Inshallah. Let me give Brother Huda a chance because he had raised his hand, and I will definitely end with Aisha to see if she has any comments on the things that we have said so far. Brother Huda.
Yeah, I was actually trying
We are 8
to.
minutes over. Please keep it brief.
Yeah, brief. No. What Naushad told, and you also said the dinner table is the daira or the teaching. It is there. It is there, but due to the way the parents busy are, and like I in my childhood, I will say that 60% or 70% I used to learn in the masjid or the community, and 30 to 40% at home. But the things have changed. So that was one of the point I was trying to make, is the change requirements now we have, that like now people are living in US and they don't have the access to the community, so it is being learned there. So that network will fill the gap of the community that we have. That's the point I wanted to make. Thanks a lot.
Jazakallah khair. Lastly, but not the least, Sister Aisha, do you have anything to the points that we have talked about with Brother Huda and Brother Naushad? Anything that you can add? If you don't have anything, that's okay too.
Actually did.
Okay, please.
Just about kids being disconnected. I feel like kids are disconnected because parents are disconnected at some level. And then about, the murshid, about daira being an ideal network that existed at one point, and murshid being its core. I completely agree, especially for us as Mahdavis. That's our whole point of our daira. However, I do feel, and I know it's not at all easy to be a murshid in this day and age, but when you read about the biography of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and even Mahdi Maud alayhi salam, I do feel that there is some sort of a disconnect in that leadership role in terms of involvement with the community. Just if you look at just the Prophet ﷺ, how he was with his wives and daughters, very expressive, very emotional, very praising, very encouraging. I don't know how our murshid.
Very much listening. Don't forget that Prophet ﷺ was probably the listener. Yeah.
Yes, and I haven't seen or heard about how our leaders necessarily even just interact with their family.
Yeah.
So just from that perspective, having a leader that is completely and totally involved and one with the people that he's leading or she's leading.
Alhamdulillah. With that, I think we will have to end. This is an excellent discussion. We can go on, like I said, but maybe there is another opportunity for us to do just a session like this, where we openly and transparently talk about the things. But I would like to end by saying that, of course, I do realize, and I cannot overemphasize the importance of having a murshid, to what Naushad has said and what Sister Aisha just said. I would have most likely drifted if not from my murshid, Nusrat Mian Tashrifullahi in Chicago. And he is probably one of the reasons that, alhamdulillah, I have kept coming back and thinking about my place and my spirituality. But with that, inshallah, let's end this. And I would first ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us if there was any shortcomings. Obviously, we are about 12 minutes late. So for the listeners, thank you so much for staying a bit longer with us. And I hope that you enjoyed or learned from what we've talked about, and at least appreciate the action items that were shared by the panelists, inshallah. And I would request MICC to make a note of some of the action items and see if we can put some programs together, research together to take this a step further. With that, I would like to end this, and thank you so much for joining. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
इश्क़ खुदा को मक़सद लैलो नहार कर چاہت میں اس کی دامن دل تار تار کر، دشمن ہے نفس اس کو نحیف و نزار کر، آسان نہیں یہ راہ مگر اس کو پار کر، ہستی مٹا کے عشق میں مشت غبار کر، ہے مہدوی تو اپنی روش اختیار کر، ہے مہدوی تو اپنی روش اختیار کر، عشق خدا کو مقصد لیل و نہار کر، دنیا یہ تیری چاہ کے قابل نہ ہو کبھی، جنت بھی تیری راہ ہو منزل نہ ہو کبھی، تو غیر حق کے سامنے سائل نہ ہو کبھی، تیری ہی ذات راہ میں حائل نہ ہو کبھی، خود کو بھی کچھ تو قابل دربار یار کر، ہے مہدوی تو اپنی روش اختیار کر، عشق خدا کو مقصد لیل و نہار کر، بغض و عناد چھوڑ محبت ہے تیرا کام، تو تابع رسول ہے مہدی کا ہے غلام، یاد خدا کے ساتھ بسر ہو یہ صبح و شام، ہستی ہی میٹنا ہے تو رہنا کہاں ہے نام، دل کو نثار وحدت پروردگار کر، ہے مہدوی تو اپنی روش اختیار کر، عشق خدا کو مقصد لیل و نہار کر، ذکر خدا توکل و دیدار کی طلب، ہجرت و ترک ہستی و عزلت ہے فرض سب، کچھ کام کر کے قصوں سے ملتا نہیں ہے رب، فرمان ہے امام کا رکھ یاد روز و شب، کرنا ہے تجھ کو کام یہی بار بار کر، ہے مہدوی تو اپنی روش اختیار کر، عشق خدا کو مقصد لیل و نہار کر، اپنوں میں غیر میں تھا تیری بات کا اثر، تو تھا عدو کے پاس بھی ایک حرف معتبر، دنیا بھی آ کے جھکتی تھی تقوی کے زور پر، لیکن یہ کیا ہوا کہ نہیں اب وہ رہ گزر، پھر سے قدیم رشتہ دی استوار کر، ہے مہدوی تو اپنی روش اختیار کر، عشق خدا کو مقصد لیل و نہار کر، قرآن کہہ رہا ہے کہ تقوی شعار بن، ہونا ہے بختیار تو بے اختیار بن، ظلمت کو چیرنے کے لیے ذوالفقار بن، ان سب سے پہلے بندہ پروردگار بن، یہ راہ مستقیم ہے تو اعتبار کر، ہے مہدوی تو اپنی روش اختیار کر، عشق خدا کو مقصد لیل و نہار کر، جب دیں کسی کو نام سے رب کے دیا کریں، ذکر خدا کو سانس کے اندر کیا کریں، ہو تحیۃ الوضو بھی ہمارا ہی وصف خاص، ہو قدر کی جو رات دوگانا ادا کریں، خود کو گرو مہدی دی میں شمار کر، ہے مہدوی تو اپنی روش اختیار کر، عشق خدا کو مقصد لیل و نہار کر، اسلاف کے عمل سے کوئی رہبری تو لے، گھر میں ہے اپنے روشنی کچھ روشنی تو لے، کیوں دیکھتا ہے غیر کی جانب ہر ایک وقت، دولت یہاں ہے دید کی بڑھ کر کبھی تو لے، جوش عمل سے قوت باطل پہ وار کر، ہے مہدوی تو اپنی روش اختیار کر، ہے مہدوی تو اپنی روش اختیار کر، عشق خدا کو مقصد لیل و نہار کر، چاہت میں اس کی دامن دل تار تار